Ladies and gentlemen, it is a pleasure to have this man on the show today. Former UFC heavyweight champion, one of the greatest heavyweights of all time, Frank Mir. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Oh, you're welcome, man. I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Now, let's get into that part first. Is you go from being one of the greatest heavyweights of all time and entering a new sport of boxing. And you have to kind of, in a way, start all over. You know, was there any mental preparation for that you had to go through?
No, just basically I use it as a challenge. I've used this statement over and over again that as a mixed martial artist, we are like the decathletes of the martial arts world. We have to be good at boxing, wrestling, jiu-jitsu, judo, all the different aspects that we use pieces of, we form it together. And so by me taking on boxing challenges it was my way of just making myself a better boxer. You know, we train boxing in the gym. You know, I go to boxing gyms, I put on the headgear, I wear shoes, and I've enveloped myself in that culture to train for MMA fights. But still, like, I haven't trained as much boxing as I've trained now the last couple of months. When you focus on a certain competition, it really elevates that skill set to another level. So I tell people, hey, if you want to challenge yourself and make yourself better at anything, sign up for a competition. You know, I mean, if you're like, hey, I like to, get better at doing fitness, well, sign up for one of those Tough Mudders or CrossFit. Trust me, if you put that on the calendar, it forces you to go ahead and prepare for it. And this is only going to make you a better warrior.
For sure. Now, you're returning to combat after a long absence. Was there ever a moment where you lost your love for fighting?
Well, no, I mean, I think there was a time there in my 30s where it became just business. I was just doing it for the financial aspects. And then that was also, too, partly due to my poor training habits. In my 20s, I could train hard for a couple days and take a couple days off. I could eat right for a week or two and eat like garbage for a week and make up for it. I was like the rabbit. But then as I got older in my 30s, I kind of kept the same program where I'm like, oh, well, as long as I start 8 weeks out, I'll be fine. Well, I wasn't. I kept showing up fatter and more injured every fight. And so probably about 39, 40, I was like, man, I got to retire. There's just, my body just can't do this anymore. And that was just due to poor preparation. So I went to be honest with everybody, I went to Columbia and did the bioaccelerator and did stem cells. And that was kind of like the beginning of my journey to try to figure out how to fix myself. And then I started training in with Nick Best, who's a world's strongest man competitor, he's 52 years old himself. So he understands getting older and still training. And then a guy named Steve Date, who trains at Lifetime, as a GM there. And so he really started showing me the culture of, hey, every day you get up, you should do cardio. Like, just whether you're a fighter or not, this is good for you. And they explained why, and my lymphatic system, and all the different reasons why I just needed to incorporate a much healthier life. And now with my kids being the warriors that they are, I want to just be a good example to them. I always felt like a general leads best from the front. And so when I asked my kids, hey, did you get up today? Did you do this? Like, even right now, they're running out of the house to go hit weight training. I'm like, hey, did you guys take your vitamins this morning? Because they were in the same spot. I didn't see them move. And they're like, no. I'm like, guys, come on, get over here. So it's easy for me now it seems more honest, and I'm constantly telling them, hey, did you do this? You do this? I just got done doing it. So of course I'm asking you to do the same.
You mentioned habits, and do you feel like your success inside the cage became your own worst enemy in some ways?
Oh, absolutely. Because I was successful, especially at an early age, without necessarily the hard work behind it, it made me lazier in that sense. And then when I got into the car wreck, it really made me mentally tough. I had to overcome things. But then it made me so mentally tough that I relied on my toughness and didn't rely on being prepared. So, for example, I'm the guy that's like, hey, did you plan for this, this, and this? Well, no, man, when we get there, we'll figure it out. Well, once we get there, I'll make it happen. And I became that guy. Like, my wife says, you're like a cat, man. No matter how bad the situation is, you land on your feet. It's like disgusting. She's like, it bothers me that you don't prepare. We'll go out of town and you don't know what hotel we're staying at, what's going on. And then the whole place is sold out, but you'll figure out a way to get it done. And so that kind of made it to where I didn't put in the proper work. So now as I've gotten older and I've seen the error of my ways, I do both. I'm a guy who plans everything. Like I know what time I'm doing what tomorrow and what needs to be fit into my schedule. And then on top of that, when things go wrong, I improvise. I'm like, oh, well, I took too long here and this place didn't leave and I needed this. Well, then figure it out, improvise, overadapt, and overcome.
Speaking of wives, my wife's most memorable moment in MMA is you snapping Nogueira's arm, and she watched it live. Like it's
oh,
just
really?
like embedded in her mind. She doesn't watch MMA too much, but that one she remembers.
That'll make an impression on you.
Yeah.
It was funny about that. So when I got home, friends of ours had DVR'd the fight at the time, right? And so we go over to their house and we're sitting there, and I wanted to watch the fight. I hadn't seen it yet, So we're sitting there watching the fight, and when I have them in the Kimura, the arm breaks, and I sit there and I kind of do this number, And my wife looked at me. She's all, "What is wrong with you?" I'm like, "Well, babe, I was in a different state of mind." You know what I mean? Like there, that's Frank Mir, the fighter, and now I'm Frank Mir, the husband and the father. I'm all, I'm like, like football players don't run around tackling people at the mall. You know what I mean? Like there's a place for everything. I'm like, so right now I'm not in that state of mind. That bothers me. It was hard to watch.
Yeah, definitely. Well, it's one of my favorite moments, man. I felt like that was probably the greatest submission in heavyweight history.
It's actually my favorite fight because of the fact that I use that to point to, like, hey, look, things were not going well for me. I was this close to that, and the fight stopped. And so, early in the fight, get rocked with a great shot. I'm almost out, and then now I'm getting put inside of a guillotine. At the time, probably one of Nogueira's best techniques that he still had, and things were looking bad, man. The fat lady was standing up; she was getting ready to belt one out, and I was able to, again, just here's the situation. Figured out how to sweep him, get on top, and take his arm.
Yeah, it was beautiful, beautiful. Now, circling back to your preparations for your boxing debut. You mentioned the cardio in the morning. I guess you're not going to have any problems with these 8 rounds that you might go the distance.
No, I think it's 6 too now.
Oh,
right?
It's 6? Okay.
Yeah.
6.
Because originally it was to be 10 rounds, and that's when I was fighting a 52-year-old fighter that wasn't known for coming in great shape. But he himself sometimes, because of how smart Tarver is, makes the same mistakes I made when I was younger. They're like, well, I'm a smarter guy. I don't need to be in the same amount of shape. Not that we say those things, but when you know you're better than somebody, it kind of makes you lazy, And so I felt that Tarver, I had that edge. So I really worked cardio for this fight in general, knowing that it was going to be a weapon that I could use. And then when I found out it was Cunningham, I realized, well, it's not a weapon I could use in this fight because he's in great shape himself. But thank God I'm in good shape because this fight wouldn't last 2 or 3 rounds if I wasn't.
Yeah, you mentioned challenges. You go from Antonio Tarver to Steve Cunningham. What are the new challenges for you?
Well, they're different fighters. Obviously on the surface, you see one's right-handed, one's left-handed. So I had to switch a couple training partners up because of that. And then, they have a different approach. Steve is going to get in front of you. You know what I mean? And if you stop moving, he throws a lot of punches. He throws a great jab, has an overhand right that has caught, Tyson Fury. His defense, he doesn't make a lot of mistakes. He's very sound. He brings up his guard is high at all times. In fact, I think I've watched about 7 or 8 of his fights now, and I don't think I could freeze frame a part where where he makes a mistake and drops his hands. The guy, it could be the 10th round, and his hands are up and ready to go. So, and he's a little bit taller and longer, and Steve made his, most of his recognition at cruiserweight. So he's actually, naturally a bigger guy than Tarver.
No matter the result, what do you think you'll learn from this whole experience?
I've learned more about boxing and learning about putting myself in situations where I don't have as much, to pull from. Anytime I enter an MMA fight, I always know that I'm one of the best grapplers in the world. Submission artist is always, a weapon in my favor. Here I'm going into a competition where one of my strongest weapons that do me so well in MMA, I don't have access to. So I'm like a gunfighter now that's going into a different kind of gunfight, and I don't have access to my best weapon. And so, but at the end of the day, I'm just proud that, that the legacy everybody has to leave behind, like what people think of you. And one thing that I really want people, when they think of me, is to come up as like, man, that guy would stand up for any challenge. Fearful, unfear, whatever the case may be, odds against him, odds in his favor, whatever. I showed up, I always came to the fight, and that's the situation here where the boxing situation got over. I see many opportunities that make me a better for taking it. And I really do see a path to victory that I feel strongly about. But at the end of the day, I'm proud that I can say, hey, look, MMA call, fighters, and I stepped up to it. And let's be realistic. I have some people, it's funny, they ask me, do you feel like this is MMA versus boxing? I'm like, not even remotely. I'm an MMA fighter competing against a boxer in a boxing match. That just shows how good that MMA fighters are, that you can even make this fight. Because if we flip realms, let's say after the fight's over with, Cunningham goes, hey, Frank's a great sport. He jumped into a boxing match. I'm going to jump into an MMA fight with him. Does anybody think that would go one round? They might not even sanction that fight because they know that it was just like, well, this is going to be so one-sided. It's not even funny. I mean, same thing with Jake Paul and Ben Askren. In a boxing match, Paul has a pretty good chance of doing well. You know what I mean? Very, he's young, athletic, and he trains really hard. Some of his sparring partners are guys that I'm friends with, and they say nothing but really good things about him. His work ethic, and the amount of punches he throws, his athleticism. And so that being said, he might win. You know what I mean? Like, I still feel Askren has the advantage in experience, and he might have if he has a great right game plan. I still see, I'm still leaning towards Ben to win, and obviously I'm pulling for the MMA guy. But if they decide to go ahead and do an MMA fight, they could do it later that night, even if Ben got knocked out. Wake him up, tell him, hey, we're doing MMA. Jake Paul ain't making it out of the first round.
Yeah, the word that comes to my mind is pummeled. That's what most likely would be the result.
Yeah, any which way he wants to.
Yeah.
You could be like, hey, I want you to take his back, put him upside down, and then go ahead and his left arm, break that one. And by the numbers, he could do it. Paul would stand no chance. I mean, that's the thing, too, that kind of helps, I think, all MMA fighters. At the end of the day, we all know that if we go we're all drinking at a bar and we go in the back alley, and it's me and Askren on one side and Jake Paul and Cunningham on the other, we're the only ones coming back inside to drink. Everybody else is going to the hospital.
Yeah. There'd be some broken arms for sure.
There'd be some broken arms.
Yeah. Now, the performance, man, like, are you going in there with a clean slate, or are you expecting to get the knockout? Are you expecting to go in there and finish this guy?
Well, my game plan, with not alluding too much, is I have to get time to want to throw down. He's very long. He actually has me by reach by 3 inches. Mine's 79. He has an 82-inch reach. And he has, guy has, 30, 40 boxing matches, right? So, and that's only his pros, not counting his amateur. It's a lot of time. I mean, he even trains his son how to box. He understands boxing. He's a very smart boxer. So I have to get him out of that element. I have to make it to where he wants to fight in a brawl. If I get him to brawl with me, well, I'm 275 pounds. He's 210. If I connect, it's going to be a good night for me. And so I only have to land one or two, and then it's over with. Whereas he's going to have to fight perfectly for 6 minutes. And he's very capable of doing it, or 6 rounds, because of his long jab. If I can get him to, to fight, if he fights a strategic fight, I'm going to have a hard time. If I can get him to fight the fight that he fought against Tyson Fury, where he was gritty and gutty and fought and just threw a lot of shots, that fight, I knock him out in.
Now, when people look at what's going on in boxing right now and the position that you're in, people are going to go back and point to the McGregor Mayweather, fight and how that opened the doors for everybody that's going on. Do you feel like that opened the door for everybody, and that's why people like MMA fighters are in this situation?
Absolutely. Well, I think what happened is that it allowed one to see that MMA fighters are more than capable of handling themselves. I mean, I had McGregor winning the first 3 rounds, pretty much hands down. And then obviously just lack of experience. He fought a 10-round fight. Had that been a 6-round fight, we might be talking right now that McGregor won. You know what I mean? Because he could have kept that pace up. I mean, you got to remember, he was holding back too, knowing that he had, 7 more rounds to go. And he basically didn't get beat by taking bad shots. He was just fatigued, and not used to fighting for 30 minutes, in a boxing match against the world's greatest boxer who's hard to hit. I would like to see that fight in 6 rounds. I think that makes it more even as far as the edge of experience that Mayweather had. So McGregor opened the door for us in that sense to allow us to go in there, and people go, oh, these guys are legitimate. They can go in here and compete. And 2, I think the boxing realizes that we bring name recognition. I mean, who knew who Steve Cunningham was before he took the fight? And the guy's a cruiserweight champ. You know what I mean? Like, there's a lot of boxers, and Cunningham's a great fighter. I'm not taking anything away from him. But as far as household recognition, there are more MMA guys that are known in the world than there are boxers. There's just the boxers have to be the Canelos or the Mayweathers. Tyson Fury, even Deontay Wilder, man. There's up until him and Tyson Fury fought each other. Stipe Miocic was way more famous. You know what I mean? I can go and, hey, you guys know who Conor McGregor is? Conor is more famous than any boxer. You know what I mean? Besides maybe Mayweather. And so I think that's another thing that opened the door for us, is that guys are looking, going, wow, these guys are extremely marketable and very profitable. A lot of guys are going to watch.
Now, while I got you here, of course, I want to talk some MMA with you. And, lately there's been a lot of criticism for commentating in MMA, and you are extremely knowledgeable. You're well-spoken. You've done a great job commentating for multiple promotions. When are we going to see you in an analyst role or a commentating role?
When
Everybody's
they give
wondering.
It to me, man. Well, I mean, the UFC is not going to probably ever let me, because I'm still fighting for other organizations. But I mean, if they ever came to me and said, hey, if you retire, we'll have you as a commentator. Well, then we'll have that conversation, because, that could be something I could do more in the future. But other shows, I mean, like, hey, look, ONE FC, if you're listening, I heard nothing good about your guys' commentary crew. I didn't watch the fight yet. I'm going to, because I want to see what happened to DJ. I've only seen highlights of it. But I mean, man, my social media blew up. And hey, look, when some of the other guys commentate for UFC and whatnot, I usually don't hear great things. I always hear people, hey, man, I wish you were in there. But man, this last one with ONE FC was like I had to finally turn my notifications off. I'm like, dude, what did you guys do that was so bad? Like, holy cow.
Yeah, definitely, man. I've been hearing people call your name for a long time, because
as soon as they give me the opportunity, I'm there. I'll take it. I mean, no one knows the sport better than I do. I mean, I'm smarter at MMA than just about everybody, and I have the experience, the knowledge. I mean, Joe Rogan, very knowledgeable about MMA but he's never really been in there. Still haven't done it. He can't sit there and tell you how he felt in a certain situation. I mean, what anecdotes and relation is he going to be able to sit there and tell the viewer? Hell, he's had as many fights as most people who are watching the UFC have. 0. You know what I mean? Just the way it is. And so, I would love to be able to get in there and show that I also not only have a technical know-how that's on par with anybody's in the world at the highest level, but then, I mean, my experience, is second to none as far as anybody in the commentating world.
Yeah, I completely agree. Now, Jon Jones, Francis Ngannou, is that the biggest fight to make in the sport right now?
Yeah, absolutely. You have the pound for pound king and Jon Jones moving up in a weight class so he can be a 2-belt champion. And so, I mean, hell, he can go win the belt and then decide to go win back the light heavyweight belt to technically have both at the same time. But I mean, Jon Jones is the best fighter pound for pound in the world. Fights that are close, people, that he barely wins, people then will freak out about because he's such a dominating fighter. Like with Dominic Reyes, you know what I mean? Like, fight was close, but third round on, he took over. But even being close, people are like, hey, man, I don't know. And so Jon's style very much leads him to be very successful against Ngannou. Because anybody that has to stand toe-to-toe with Francis is dead. The guy just hits too freaking hard, and he has a good chin himself, So, that's always going to be a coin toss that you're probably going to be playing with a guy who has a double-headed coin. You know what I mean? Like, you're not going to win. And so with Francis, you have to grab him and take him down. And I think that Jon actually possibly, and look, if Francis lands on him, it's over with. No one can take that shot. But if I had to sit there and go, well, is there a path for victory for Jon? Well, yeah, there is. Francis still, no matter what, he has too much white fiber tissue, meaning that's what enables him to be so explosive, is also going to make it to where Francis is never going to be great at endurance sports. He's not built for it. Now, if the guy wanted to go into strongman competition or be a power lifter or a sprinter, he's built for those things in spades, right? And so Jon has phenomenal endurance. And another area where I was sitting and go, well, now obviously the grappling is the no-brainer. You got to grab Francis and take him down. But the good thing is if Francis sits back and doesn't engage with Jon, and Jon kicks extremely well. You've seen him knock Daniel Cormier out, with the kick to the head. He hurts people with his legs, the knee to Hua. He hurts people with his leg attacks. So he could kick and strike at Francis at distance that's safe for him to avoid getting punched. And then when Francis now has to leap in, now you're forcing Francis to come inside that kicking range or get picked apart for 5 rounds. So when he comes in, that's when Jon can grab him. And I mean, Jon just has to grab him one time, and when he takes him down, even if Francis survives that grappling match, the fatigue on his muscles, he won't be throwing any more knockout punches. He just has to take him down once, rough him up a little bit, and then in the second round, Jon will be safe. But I mean, and that's all being said, but that's why I would probably pick Jon to do very well. But I mean, I've talked to Francis. The guy's a really smart guy. I think sometimes, people don't ever be fooled by the language barrier that he's not one of the smarter guys that I've ever met. He's extremely savvy. He was talking to me about business and how he, with the UFC and whatnot, and how he knows how they deal with their contracts. He said things that it's taken me 20 years to figure out business-wise. I'm like, wow, I'm really happy that you're the champ now, and maybe you can change some things, because he understands the rules of the game, and he's a savvy guy. So that being said, he understands what Jon's strong points were, not being grabbed, and he'd have to figure out a game plan to make sure he can land that shot before he gets tired from the grappling.
Yeah, and Jones, he's asking for this big payday to face Ngannou, and rightfully so. Ngannou seems like he's supporting him fully. Fighter pay has always been an issue. How important is it for the sport that Jones is fighting for more money right now?
Extremely important. It sets the bar for everybody else, and that's why they're fighting so hard. If they would just let Jon make money and they didn't have to disclose it to anybody, they'd probably go ahead and pay him the money. It'd be worth it. They're going to make it back. But whenever you do that, you set precedents, right? Like, okay, well, now Jon asked for more money. We gave him, it's like having multiple children. The one kid goes, hey, Dad, can I get $100? Well, you better be ready to hand all your kids $100 now, because, you can't just favor one. So when Jon sits there and is able to point out the amount of pay-per-view buys he's going to able to pull up, he deserves to get paid more money. He's, the king of MMA. And so, but if they do so, that means that raises everybody's price. And that's what the UFC is afraid of. Look, they've kept people down. They still keep 90% of what they make, right? The one stat that came out was 94% of the money that they make off a pay-per-view goes to them, and not to, I think, what was it, 8% or 6% goes to the fighters. If they're to put that into a real simple terms, when Deontay Wilder fought Tyson Fury, I saw the pay-per-view buys that came out. Well, me and Brock Lesnar, we broke those pay-per-view buys. We sold more pay-per-views than they did. Me and Brock's money put together wasn't even like a tenth of what Wilder made. So, it just shows you the amount of money. Like, well, wait a minute, how come they made $30 million each, plus, or, and we barely made $3 million combined. Their pay-per-view was cheaper? No, they got a bigger share of what they generated than what we did. That just shows you the difference between UFC and the other, and what they're doing, because they're able to control that. There's only one big promotion in the league, Bellator's out there and PFL's out there, and one right now actually is starting to make some strong moves. Now that they're going to get it, more streamlined to the American audience, I feel like they could make some big moves and start really to threaten the number one hold. But let's face it, right now, 90% of the market share for MMA is even called UFC fighting. Do the UFC fighting. It doesn't matter what promotion you fight for, they call it UFC. That's how much of a namesake that they are. So they got all control. But when you go over to boxing, you have different promotions, and the promoter's not going to let you rip his fighter off. So that's why they are able to negotiate more money for the fighter, and they don't get screwed over. Because, hey, you imagine, look, if Bob Arum owned both Fury and Wilder, you think they would have both made millions of dollars? No, he would have kept the millions and had them fight for $1 million apiece. And that's what the UFC does.
With one championship gaining some ground in North America, and they do have an international audience, and they have Muay Thai with MMA gloves. Is that something that interests you? I think I can see you doing that.
Yeah, 100%. Because I would like to do, I told Malky, my manager, I'm like, hey, look, and this is how this all started. When I saw the BKFC stuff coming up, the bare knuckle fighting, I'm like, look, I want to do that. I said, I want to do some boxing matches. I'd like to do some kickboxing matches. And actually, I told them, I said, the ONE FC stuff where they're wearing the MMA gloves, I said, that would be cool. And the other thing, actually, too, to just throw it out there, I want to do a Sanshu matches, like the Kung Lee used to do, right? Where you had the MMA kickboxing, or, kickboxing with, takedowns. You throw guys. I was like, oh, that's awesome. Like, I want to compete in that, too.
I love it. I love it. I love it that at your age you're still like looking at options and spreading your wings. You know what I mean? A lot of people would just shut it down and be like, it's over for me. But it's great to see.
Oh, thank you so much. Well, no, I got my children that are inspiring me all the time. So that's one thing right now. I just had a pad session, and one of the rounds, my partner, that's my lifting partner, he's been hanging out with me in all my different workouts. His name is Zach, right? So I kind of like, hey, you work out 4 times a day. I kind of need a buddy, someone to hang out with, and to sit there and drink protein shakes with afterwards, right? So he lifts with me, but I do all the fighting stuff by myself, or him just hanging out. And so Zach was telling me today, I was like, hey man, could you count how many punches I'm throwing around? So we counted it. We were already on the 3rd round. We started counting. I averaged over 200 punches a round for 6 rounds hard. And he said after, he goes, man, your cardio, has it ever been like this? I'm like, no, man, I've never been in this kind of shape. He goes, what do you think it is? I'm like, well, I think it's because my kids now are old enough to see me for who I am. Whereas in the past, parents, we think that we're smarter than our kids. We don't realize that they have the same brain we have, just lack of experience. And so now, the days of me, I don't feel like it today. I'm hurting, I'm sore, whatever, of laying inside the bed. I'm like, I can't do that anymore. I said, just the other day, this was probably about a month ago when our fighting my camp took in a whole other pace. And I was like, I just don't feel like training today, man. Damn, I'm tired. I woke up. I kept hitting the snooze on the alarm. I didn't want to get up. And I just sat there and I realized that if I stayed in bed, my kids would know. Even if I shut the door, my kids are outside and they're like, Dad's truck's in the driveway. He didn't go train today. He skipped out on practice. What's going on? And because I'm their father and I want to lead by example, I can't do that. And so that's really been probably, if you want to point at one thing that's what inspired me, it's my children, and people say that, but I'm like, well, why? And that's why. My kids are all phenomenal athletes and they do so well. I just want to be able to not only say, hey, I don't like the phrase, do as I say, not as I do. I hate that. I want to be that general that leads from the front line.
Definitely a general. One last thing, you've held the UFC title multiple times, and Conor McGregor, Dustin Poirier, they're going to fight for a 3rd time in July. Poirier turned down the title shot to face McGregor, right? Does that lower the value or diminish the value of the championship belt that the guy, probably the best guy in the division, is not fighting for it?
I think it shows you that people now, that Poirier is smart enough to realize that people don't care about the titles. I mean, they really don't. I mean, it's a great little moniker to put, hey, I was the champ. Hey, look, for the rest of my life, I'm announced as the 2-time UFC heavyweight champ. It does give you, some validity to your name. But at the end of the day, I mean, Conor McGregor is Conor McGregor. If the UFC can go bankrupt tomorrow, Conor ain't going anywhere. Do you know what I mean? Like, he's bigger than the show itself. And so fighters are starting to realize that, well, I have to stop worrying about being the UFC champ, and I got to worry about me being a superstar. And that's what's important. That's what the UFC really doesn't want. They don't ever want the fighter to be bigger than the show. But guess what? Conor opened that door, and now that's how it is. You want to be like a Fedor, where your name is bigger than the show that you're on. And that's what Poirier has now realized, that his connection with McGregor is earning him more revenue in the long run. Even if he were to make more money for the title fight, it's smarter to fight McGregor, because if he goes out and gets a 3rd victory now over McGregor, his namesake, his ability to go get sponsorships, public speaking, that brand identity, is just, that's invaluable. And that's what you carry with you even after you're no longer the champ.
April 17th, Triller. Frank Mir, man, you're an inspiration, man. Thank you so much. It was an honor to speak with you.
Oh, likewise. It was a good interview. Thank you so much. Good questions.
Take a move in the ring. You can hit me with a